He walks into his favorite cafe on a quiet morning, the bell above the door chiming like the beginning of something sacred, something that can only be heard when the heart is still enough to listen. The smell of freshly ground coffee wraps around him like an embrace, mingling with the soft sweetness of baked pastries and the muffled conversations of early risers who sit hunched over their drinks, clinging to the final moments of calm before the day begins its sprint. The wooden floor creaks beneath his feet in a familiar rhythm, a soft staccato of footsteps that echo the years he's spent finding solace in this very place. This cafe, with its faded brick walls and handwritten menu boards, its potted plants by the windows and quiet jazz humming through vintage speakers, has been his sanctuary through storms, literal and emotional, and even the baristas know his rhythm. A nod, a smile, the order ready before he speaks. He always gets a double-shot latte with oat milk and a drizzle of caramel, and it arrives like clockwork, warm and rich, like something meant to be savored slowly, like time itself had steeped into its flavor. But today is different. Today, as he steps to the counter and opens his mouth to place the order that they already know, he sees someone he does not know, or thinks he doesn't. A new face, unfamiliar and yet strikingly familiar, stands behind the counter. A young woman with warm, curious eyes that hold galaxies of questions and a shy smile that curves like the start of a memory. Her hands move with grace as she prepares his drink, but it's the moment when their eyes meet that something shifts, like a string pulled taut between them, trembling with recognition not of name, but of soul. For a heartbeat, he forgets how to speak. She hesitates, just barely, the way someone might pause at the edge of a long-forgotten trail. There's something in her gaze, not fear, not surprise, but a delicate flicker of something older than both, something like a whisper from the past, a resonance that hums quietly between them. She hands him the drink, her fingers brushing his for a fraction of a second, and in that touch, something breaks open. He thanks her, voice calm but heart racing, and steps aside, walking toward his usual window seat. The sun spills in through the glass panes like liquid gold, casting warm shadows on the floor, and he sits there, sipping his latte, trying to shake the feeling that he's seen her before, not in passing, but in a life that once felt like home. The way she moved, the way she blinked slowly before speaking, the exact shape of her smile, it pulls at something he thought he had buried deep. For a moment, he allows the feeling to pass, to dissolve into the comfort of routine, but then he looks back. She's standing at the counter again, serving someone else, but her gaze flickers toward him once more, and this time, he doesn't look away. He sets his cup down, heart tapping against his chest like a question waiting to be asked, and stands. He walks back to the counter. "Excuse me," he says gently, the words like stepping onto a frozen lake, not sure whether they'll hold. "But, have we met before?" Her hand still's on the coffee cup she's holding. A silence stretches between them, thin, fragile, but alive. She looks at him, really looks at him, and a blush blooms on her cheeks, soft as dawn. Her lips part slightly, and she glances down, almost smiling, before lifting her eyes again. "I think, maybe," she says, voice barely above a whisper. And in those few syllables, he hears the echo of laughter beneath spring blossoms, the crunch of leaves under autumn walks, the hush of midnight talks beneath starlit skies. "Emma," she says, and it hits him like sunlight after months of winter. The name crashes into him like a wave of memory, of afternoons in the park with nowhere to go, of books exchanged with handwritten notes in the margins, of promises whispered between kisses, and of the silence that followed a night that broke them both. His heart stumbles in his chest. Emma. He remembers the fight now. Loud words, teary eyes, doors closed with finality, the hurt so sharp it bled into every morning after. She had left without goodbye, just vanished, and he never knew where or why. And yet here she was, standing inches from him, pouring coffee and old memories in the same breath. She gestures toward a side table. "Can you stay for a minute?" she asks, her voice steadying, gaining strength with every word. He nods, and they sit across from each other, the cafe world around them growing distant, hushed, as if it knows this moment is too tender to interrupt. She begins slowly, like unraveling a knot one strand at a time. She tells him how, after the fight, everything fell apart inside her. How she packed her bags in the middle of the night, took the train to nowhere, and started over in a small town where no one knew her name. How she chose the name Emma, not as a lie, but as a shield, a softer version of herself, one that didn't carry the weight of everything she lost. She worked in bookstores, in bakeries, in little shops with peeling wallpaper and smiling strangers. But it was in cafes, places like this, that she found slivers of peace. The sound of milk frothing, the smell of cinnamon and espresso, the way people softened with a warm cup in their hands, it reminded her of the life she once had. Of him. And slowly, she began to build a version of herself that didn't ache with every breath. She moved back to the city last month, took this job because it felt familiar, grounding. And now here he was, like a character from a dream showing up in a chapter she thought was closed. He listens, silent but burning inside, every word she speaks painting a new shade on the picture he thought he knew. When she pauses, he reaches across the table, his hand shaking slightly, and touches hers. I never stopped thinking about you, he says, his voice thick with emotion. Not a single day. I thought you left because I ruined everything. She shakes her head, eyes bright with tears. I thought you'd moved on. That you were better off without me. They laugh softly, brokenly, like survivors of the same storm meeting years later in the wreckage. Over the next hour, they talk about everything, what they've done, who they've become, the regrets that still wake them up at night. They remember the little things, how she used to hum while washing dishes, how he always left sticky notes with tiny poems in her coat pocket, how they used to name the stars on their rooftop even though the city lights blurred most of them out. They talk about the big things too, how scared they were, how they let pride and fear take the wheel, how they were both too young to know how to fight for what mattered. Forgiveness hovers between them, fragile but real, like a bird willing to land if only they stay still long enough. He tells her about the years after she left, how he drowned himself in work, in distractions, in relationships that felt like shadows of what they had. He admits he'd come to this cafe because it was the only place that didn't feel empty. She listens with her whole being, her eyes never leaving his, her hand tightening around his like she's afraid he'll disappear again. The hours pass without their knowing. The light shifts across the cafe, golden and slow, as if time itself is watching them, rooting for them. When she finally stands, he stands with her. Can we do this again? He asks, and his voice isn't nervous, it's hopeful. She nods, not with certainty, but with courage. They walk out together, the bell above the door chiming again, this time like an ending and a beginning folded into one. Outside, the world looks the same but feels different. The trees rustle gently, the sky is brushed with the soft orange of early evening, and every breeze feels like a sigh of relief. They walk side by side, hands brushing, and when their fingers find each other again, they don't let go. There are no promises made, no declarations of forever, just a quiet agreement to try. To listen more, to speak softer, to forgive faster. As they walk past familiar streets, laughing at nothing and everything, they carry with them a sense of reverence for what was, and a cautious hope for what could be. They talk about books and music and dreams they never stopped having. They share fears, lingering wounds, and soft, unspoken prayers that maybe this time, they won't break what's healing. The city moves around them, people going about their lives, unaware that two hearts are learning to beat in harmony again. When they reach the park, the one they used to sit in with melting ice cream cones and tangled hands, they pause. The bench is still there. Weathered. Waiting. They sit, and it feels like no time has passed and yet like 1,000 lifetimes have. She rests her head on his shoulder, and he closes his eyes, letting the warmth of her presence fill the hollow that had lived inside him for too long. In this moment, they are not who they were or who they fear they'll become. They are simply two souls who have found each other again, not by accident, but by the quiet persistence of love that refuses to die. The sky turns a deeper shade of lavender, and somewhere nearby, a street musician begins to play a soft tune that wraps around them like a lullaby. They sit until the stars begin to appear, faint but real, and when they finally part, it's with the understanding that the story isn't over. That some endings are just new beginnings dressed in disguise. They hug for a long time, not tight, but close, like people who know how precious presence can be. And as he watches her walk away, she turns once, smiles, and it's the same smile that once made him believe in forever. And maybe, just maybe, it still can.